podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for a Tuesday morning news update, bringing you all the latest in the world of Sunderland AFC. I'm joined by Johnny Hawley to go over these bits and bobs that I've got here assembled, ready to chat about. Hello, mate.
Hey, Gav. You all right?
I am. I'm very, very good. Disclaimer, it isn't actually Tuesday morning. We're releasing this on Tuesday morning. So if anything happens between now, like 7:30 on a Monday night, and first thing when this drops, then we might not have time to cover it off. But we are bringing everybody up to date with what's going on in the world, Johnny, which we've become a bit of a gruesome twosome on this sort of thing, haven't we, I mean, you?
They're going to get sick of us soon. Until that day, we'll keep pumping them out.
Sunderland's version of Mike Neville, and you're probably too young for Mike Neville. You wouldn't even know who he is.
Straight over my head, that like.
Well, to be fair, Mike Neville never even presented sports, but he was on ITV Time Tees when I was a kid. And whenever I think of local news, I just think of Mike Neville and Simon O'Rourke. Weirdly, obviously Simon O'Rourke was on at the weekend. And Bob Johnson, the weather presenter, you won't even know who he is either. But never mind. You're too young, mate. You don't have a clue.
I know Simon O'Rourke at least.
Well, after this, Google Bob Johnson weatherman. He was mint. He was like this little wrinkly Scottish fella who used to do the weather on Tyne Tees News. And I don't know, something about me childhood. Now it's all coming back to us all. Anyways, talking shite, we're here to talk about Sunderland. First off the bat, Johnny, there's been a report out today about agent fees, which have been paid out by clubs in the Championship over the calendar year between 2nd of February 2024 and the 3rd of February 2025, which was, of course, the closing of the January transfer window in 2024 and the closing of the January transfer window this year. Sunderland apparently paid out £2,170,045 to agents in that period, which is a lot of money and sounds like a lot of money, and it's made me wonder why I never became a football agent. But at the same time, when you see the amounts that some of the other clubs spent in that time, it's enough to make you cry. Now, before we get into the actual detail of this, right, I want to caveat this by saying Leeds in that period were in the Championship. Okay, so there were 3 clubs in that list who were in the Premier League at the back end of the January window. Leeds in that entire time were in the Championship. Okay, so topping that list, of course, are Leeds United, and they paid out £18,836,447 on agent fees in 1 year.
Obscene.
It is, isn't it?
I mean,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
That's one of those things that you see these tables of different like figures and, wage to turnover and all that kind of stuff comes up. Stuff like this where you see Leeds so far and away above everyone else, I think, thank God we're run the way we are. Because if you saw us spending that kind of money just on agent fees while in the second tier, you'd start to be thinking that we're going to be going bust any day now.
Well, what it probably shows is that they've really gambled on promotion. And well, if they don't go up this year, they want to hope they bloody do. Looks like they're going to, to be fair, but still. Looking around the rest of the list before we actually specifically talk about Sunderland, Burnley paid out about 5.3 million. Cardiff paid 2.3, which when you say Sunderland paid 2.1, Cardiff paid out more money than we did, and they're struggling. It looks like they're probably going to get relegated. Hull, 3.1 million. Which I was actually shocked wasn't more, given they've signed about 1 million players in the last year. But yeah, Hull have paid out more than we have. Luton, 2.4 million. Middlesbrough, 2.5 million. Norwich, 2.6 million. Sheffield United, 4.4 million. Watford, just a little bit less than us, 2.1, just under. West Brom, 2.4 million. So, Sunderland on 2.1, it doesn't seem particularly bad actually, but I just wince when I think, God, agents are sucking so much money out of the game, and you consider our sort of season tickets that brings in between 8 and 10 million a year. 2 point something of that went to bloody agents on fees. A necessary evil in the game, I suppose. You've got to deal with agents on transfers and stuff, but it doesn't make you feel any better about it, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I agree. I think, in the ideal world, we wouldn't deal with agents at all. But obviously in the the world of football as it is now, if you try and take a principled stance on basically anything, you just get left in the dust by everybody else who doesn't give two shits about it and just, tramples all over you. But I think, some of the players that we've signed over the past couple of seasons, you look at how much they're worth to us now and how comparatively little compared to everybody else we are shelling out on the agents' fees. I think that's only a sign of, positivity from the recruitment team, because they do the due diligence on everybody and every facet of them, but they've clearly either found a negotiating strategy or found a way of identifying players where they're not going to be kind of held ransom by the agents and had the piss taken out of them. So I think that's a really, really good sign. It's, we're not like a million miles away from most of the other teams in the league, so we're kind of about like average-ish.
Yeah.
But some of them names that you rattled off that are higher than us and some significantly higher, who would you rather be on the pitch and in the league table? You'd rather be us, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's it. And a lot of people look at the transfer. I remember last summer, in particular, some of the transfer business Hull did, and actually at the end of that January window where they signed like Fabio Carvalho and I'm trying to think of else they signed, but they signed a couple of really big names and stuff. A lot of the time Hull are signing players, and people do look at them and think, "What we doing?" Like that happens every summer. Hull go mental, and we maybe take our time, and it does send people a bit wappy. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no real detail on this, but still, I just look at this and go, oh, God's sake, man! All that money that I could have had, I could have been building myself a mansion. So after I finish this podcast, I'm going to look up how to train to be a football agent. I think it should be my next career move. But yes, 63,201,447 pence in total spent by Championship clubs just on agents. That's a lot of money. That's money that doesn't go back into the game. It goes completely out of the game. The agents aren't then reimbursing that money back to other clubs, and they're not putting that back into the system. That's money that just disappears and doesn't go back in, and it's Anyways, that's enough about leeches. Actually, we're about to talk about Tommy Watson, and a lot of people have been calling him a leech recently. Not me. I will stress that. I feel bad for him, and I mentioned this on the pod the other day. Some of the booing and just some of the comments about him doesn't sit right with me. I'm not a fan of the fact that he's leaving, but at the same time, he's a kid. But there's been a really detailed piece in the Sunderland Echo this weekend about Tommy Watson and about that move to Brighton. And I almost feel as though parts of it were written by his agent, but we're not going to speculate. It was clearly written by somebody close to either the deal or to him or, family. Somebody close to Tommy Watson has wrote that piece, or at least filled the blanks in on that piece. And given the Echo the information, which is good because we've managed to glean a lot more information from the deal than we knew before. Just to rattle through some of the main talking points out of that. Apparently, he was offered a Premier League level wage that Sunderland couldn't match, which sounds about right, doesn't it? I mean, can't imagine we would be prepared to pay our second choice left winger in the Championship a Premier League wage. It's just not going to happen, is it?
No, not before we've guaranteed where we're going to play next season. Because, if we went up, we maybe could have thought about trying to match it. And even then, probably not, because Brighton have got a hell of a lot more money than us. But you're not going to be doing that now.
No. And they're able to pay players that they've got no intention of playing ridiculous money. It's just the way it is when you're particularly a stable Premier League club, a top half Premier League club. You can do these things. But one of the other bits which was interesting was the fact that it was pointed out that he's actually been given assurances that he'll be competing for a first team place. I mean, I don't know if I believe that to be the case. Maybe what in pre-season? Like, I guarantee he's out on loan next season somewhere. Like, I can't see him. There's stranger things have happened. If he's not lighting up the world for Sunderland, he's not going to do it in the Prem. Like at this age, he needs to be playing games. But perhaps they've said to him, "You'll come in pre-season and you'll be part of the first team squad." And Premier League teams do use their under-21s in pre-season because a lot of the time, particularly when there's tournaments on in the summer and things, or if there's been a busy end of the season, they'll start pre-season without some of the more established players, and they maybe don't come in till a couple of weeks after the rest. And that means that the under-21s get taken on all these tours all over the world and things like that. So, I imagine he'll be part of the first team squad for pre-season, but realistically, do you see him being anywhere near their first team?
No, but I did think it was quite interesting the way it was written. Can't remember the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of basically Brighton are looking at moving a few people on, and then kind of the vacuum that's left behind, they're looking at Tommy Watson as one of the players to come in and immediately be challenging to fill that void. But I mean, Brighton have got the likes of Kaoru Mitoma, as one of their starting winger options, somebody who's proven at the top level now in the Premier League that he's got, bags and bags of ability, and he's shown it in, week in, week out in the Premier League. If I was Watson or a Brighton fan, I'd actually be a bit concerned thinking, lads, you're not expecting me to come in and start delivering on the level of like a Mitoma or somebody like that, because I know Brighton sell a player or two for big money every summer and then they, recruit cheaply to fill in the blanks and stuff. But that would be a hell of a lot of pressure to be, heaping on the shoulders of a young and really, really inexperienced lad. So I'd be amazed if he was beyond pre-season actually one of those starting options. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Mitoma's nearly 28 and he's probably going to be sold to, he's been linked with Liverpool over the weekend. So that's the level of player they've got on that side of the pitch. It would be really, something if he managed to go in there and replace him, which it's just not going to happen. Another interesting point, feels he hasn't had enough first team minutes aside from being injured. He feels like he hasn't played anywhere near as much as he probably deserves. And the decision to prioritise Romain Mundle over him helped make his decision. Another interesting one, because fair enough, but Mundle's a good few years ahead in terms of his profile. He's older than Watson. He's more ready than Watson. He's actually proven himself when he's been fit. Watson's just, for me, he's a kid. Like, you're going to get chances, and he's probably looking at someone like Chris Rigg in particular, and Job coming in and basically being catapulted to the moon, and looking at that and going, well, why am I not being given those same chances because in that end of last season when the under-21s got to the Premier League final, he was a big part of that and he was scoring all the goals and getting the assists and stuff. But in the summer, I can remember talking about Tommy Watson and he was getting chances. He was playing in pre-season. He scored when we were over in Spain. He wasn't ahead of Mundle in the pecking order, but I think it's harsh to say he hasn't had opportunities. He's played a lot of minutes, I think, already, considering you imagine if he hadn't got injured when he did, he'd have started another 10 games, 15 games or whatever it would have been between now and then. So I think that if that's what he thinks, then fair enough, but I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth as well. It's that injury that he picked up, isn't it? He'd come into the team, Mundle picked up his injury, Watson comes in, starts finding his feet, and then, I was at the Stoke home game where he scored those 2 goals, and I thought he was really, really good that day. But he picked up an injury, like he can't play if he's injured. So he must understand, like, he would have been starting those games. It's not a case of other people being preferred. It's just that he himself wasn't available. And you think back to the very start of the season, obviously we had Clark I think we had him for 2 games, did we, at the start of the season? Yeah. And certainly for Sheffield Wednesday at home. And Clark was producing goals and assists immediately. Then he leaves, Mundle comes in, and he's producing goals and assists immediately. So it's not like Clark left and Mundle struggled, and then you think, right, well, Watson's got, a bit of a case here because Mundle's went 5 games without doing anything and could have made a case to put Watson in. But yeah, as you say, he was third choice, then Clark left, he was second choice. First choice got injured, he comes in, he gets injured. I don't see how the club can bear any responsibility for that, really. And certainly not the coaching staff, because they don't make the decisions about transfers. So yeah, that left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, I think, as a fan, because you do think a bit like, it's a bit ungrateful, that, isn't it? Which is a stupid, like, emotional thing to say, but, you were getting picked. It's not anyone's fault you got injured.
Yeah. The overall gist of this piece, to me, made me feel like he's been angling to get away probably since the summer. Since before then, they actually mentioned that had he not got injured when he was signing his pro deal, he might have left then because he was being linked to Rangers. So, there's other bits in here too. Ian Hart was mentioned, and the fact that it was categorically stated he had nothing to do with the deal, and that Watson's agency, who Hart doesn't work for, are pissed off that Ian Hart has got involved on social media and basically created bad feeling around, and I've said this, I think I said it to you the other week, I think if he doesn't do that, we probably move on pretty quick from it and just get on with it. And he certainly wouldn't be getting booed at games. It's helped to create bad feeling, rightly or wrongly, it has. And apparently, by all accounts, they were keen to make that point that Ian Hart's had nothing to do with it. Again, though, I will say it's up to you whether you believe that or not. You tell me he's not spoke to Tommy Watson at all about
in an unofficial capacity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you put yourself in Tommy Watson's shoes, you're a footballer. Your lass's dad is an ex-footballer who is also an agent who has brokered multi-million-pound football deals. You're not talking to him about your potential departure and going to the Premier. Of course you are.
And also famously a multi-million-pound deal from the club you want to leave very recently. Like, of course he must have had a word in his ear, but like you said, just in that personal sense, even of what would you do? Do you have any advice? Like, I'm sure those conversations must have happened.
No, of course they have. But
it was interesting as well in the article, though, because you mentioned about the bad feeling from Watson's agency. I thought it was interesting how there was like a paragraph or so specifically mentioning how Watson's leaving with the club's best wishes and there's no hard feelings from anybody actually at the club in the hierarchy. I thought that was interesting because I think we said, didn't we, recently that Labrise sounded a bit like hacked off with the whole situation and stuff. So I thought it was interesting that there was a lot of kind of smoothing over from various sides in the piece. Mm-hmm. And as you said, it must have come from somebody close to Watson at least, or the club. So that to me was quite telling, that the club also want this to be seen as a positive thing to reinforce the pathway for future academy players and future signings, to be like, look, no, we're not the ones who are fuming about it. It's not us. it's just all this outside noise. We're still here to develop you and sell you on if that's what ends up being the case. So I don't know if you read into it anything like I did, but that to me stuck out quite a lot.
Yeah, and the other thing that stuck out to me was the fact that it still hasn't been said why this has come out now.
Yeah.
So we know all these little details now. We still don't know whose decision it was to announce this now. I mean, it was said that once it became clear he wouldn't sign a new deal, Sunderland wanted to cash in on him. But that doesn't mean that they wanted to announce that this deal had been done now.
Yeah.
And that's the bit I want to know. I want to know why it's, because again, we talk about the bad feeling around it, and to be honest, I think to a large extent we've spent a lot of time talking about this recently, and hopefully this is the last time we have to talk about it. But yeah, nobody knows why it came out now. Why it came out in April. I mean, that can't have been helpful. My suspicion is still the same as it was when we first talked about this, and it's that an agent or a journalist, i.e. Fabrizio Romano, who could, because even in January, he was the one reporting all the details on this particular deal, Watson to Brighton. He tweets about it and says this is happening. He even tweeted details about the fee and things like that, which initially they weren't out there. And I suspect that he or somebody else who's of high repute has cottoned onto this deal that it was going to happen, and they've basically had the hand force and had to prepare some sort of PR around it. But yeah, we still don't know that. Hopefully it comes out. I mean, no one's going to outright say, by the way, the agent leaked this to Fabrizio Romano.
No.
But, I mean, given my suspicion is that these details to the Echo have been given to them by the agency, they're then not going to turn around and say, by the way, it's our fault that everybody knows about this in April. So, I mean, make of it what you will. There's still a bit of grey area there, but at least we know more about it, and I think it was a good piece. I think, it's not very often that you get something that's been talked about on this pod in recent weeks quite a bit when we've been interviewing some of the more experienced sports journalists who cover the club and have done for many years, is that there isn't a lot of actual journalism goes on these days. But this, to me, was interesting. It was a good piece of journalism. So, yeah, props to the Echo for getting this piece out. But anyways, on to the next thing. Here's some more tenable. I'm trying to second guess myself now. What's the word? It's tenable, isn't it? Tenable. There we go. It's late. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, shit stories. We'll call them. Alan Nixon is up to his old tricks again. touting Sunderland players about and making zero sense, because apparently Sheffield United want Dan Ballard, according to Alan Nixon. Apparently he is the old school defender Chris Wilder wants if they get promoted. Now, this would be a really weirdly timed story, because Sheffield United are absolutely shitting the bed and chucking away automatic promotion at the minute. So why they would be discussing potential transfer targets with the best mate of the agents, Alan Nixon, right now, would be a bit strange. However, it might be that Ballard's agent is trying to stir the pot a little bit. We don't know, but that story's out there. Apparently, Sheffield United fancy Dan Ballard if they get promoted, and we don't. To be honest, that's actually something I could see. Mm-hmm. I think if we don't get promoted, that naturally, because it's hard for promoted sides to strengthen their team, that it will, just like it was with Jack Clark at Ipswich, there will be players in our squad who are fancied by those teams. So, I mean, it's not a stretch, to be fair, is it? I know I'm taking the piss out of Alan Nixon a bit there, but it's not a stretch to say that, they could realistically be in for Dan Ballard. And given his injury record, I don't think Sunderland would be totally set against potentially moving him along if it came to it, if I'm honest. I don't know what you think, but Dan Ballard is a good player, we know that, but whether he's so good that we don't want to, fend off all the interest in him that's potentially coming our way, I'm not completely sure, if I'm honest.
So I think Ballard's a bit of an interesting one, to be honest, because I remember probably 12 to 18 months or so ago, I think most of us were saying, like, wow, this guy looks absolutely Rolls Royce at this level. He's easily going to be playing Premier League football in, 2 or 3 years' time, whether it's with us or somewhere else. So in a sense, generally, I think it does make sense. And I think, like you said as well, the example of Clark going to Ipswich makes a lot of sense. For that comparison to be made with the coming summer. There are going to be promoted sides where if we don't go up, especially since we've had such a good season, they're going to look at us and go, well, they've got players who were as good as or better than ours in the same season. So we'll look at them. But then, so 12 to 18 months ago, Ballard, I would have been like, yeah, it makes total sense. But then what's happened since? The injuries, the loss of form at times, being in and out of the side, general inconsistency, I think, has made me question whether he is actually ready to make the step up yet. But having said that, I do think Sheffield United's probably a decent option for him if he was to take that leap, because I think, unlike Clark at Ipswich, where as an attacking player, and going to Ipswich in particular, I thought he was always destined to really struggle, and he wouldn't be given necessarily a chance to impose himself. I think Ballard's a kind of player, and Sheffield United's the kind of team where, yeah, even if they get relegated and they get battered a few times, they're going to be defensively minded first and foremost, and especially if Wilder's still in charge. So in a strange way, it's almost better to try and make your name in the Premier League in a team like that if you're a defender or a keeper, because you just get so many opportunities to do things, to make tackles, to, big towering headed clearances and stuff. You end up generally coming out quite well on all the metrics towards the end of the season. Like, you tend to see the poorer teams' keepers in the league get a lot of hype and praise because they're tested so much. You're given a chance to see what they can do. So I could see it happening. To be honest, I think I could see it happening even if we do go up. You know what I mean? He's the kind of player who I could see us going, actually, while his stock be as high as it's going to get, if we plan to replace him, let's get some money in. And certainly if we don't go up, I mean, anything's on the table, isn't it? But it was because it's come from Nixon. I'm reluctant to give it too much credence, but I do actually think that's something that I could see happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with Ballard, and I agree with everything you said about the way that ultimately he would probably be more suited to playing in the Premier League. I think I've said this before about him, because I think his style naturally lends it to being a more defensive team. Like, I don't look at Dan Ballard and think, when we're trying to play out from the back, that he's necessarily the best option in that role, which is why even when he was fit, Luke O'Nien was getting selected ahead of him alongside Mepham. There was a period where they played together, but not a very big one. But yeah, I actually think if we get promoted, I would love to have him. I mean, I would love to have Dan Ballard anyways. I think he's a cracking player. But the issue is, as I said before, is that his record and whether whether we can stay fit enough to even make an impact in the top level. And Ballard, unlike some of the others, I mean, he was signed as a young player, wasn't he? But I mean, and he is still young. He's 25, but he'll be 26 in September, and that's sort of his peak age, or he's just getting into his peak, and that's also a prime age to sell a player. And the club know this, and they might look at it and go, with his injuries, the fact that he's it sounds stupid, but he's getting older. He's going to be 26-year-old, which is sort of the point where it's past the point where he's not a young player anymore. He's in the prime of his career. He's coming up to the prime of his career. The club might well look at that and say, yeah, might be the right time to move him along. But with virtually every player we've got that is being linked to other clubs, whether there's any truth in any of them or not, it all hinges on whether we get promoted.
Yeah.
If we get promoted, we're not going to sell him. We're going to want him as part of our team. But if we don't get promoted and we have to rebuild a bit next season, then the injury-prone players that have a bit of value are going to be, they're going to be the ones that try and move on quickest.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's all based on league status, because if we're in the Championship, we're not going to have 150 million quid rolling in from TV rights deals and all that. So we'll have to make our own cash, and the best way to do that is to sell players. And as much as a lot of our fans aren't going to like the fact that our best players and even some of just our decent and good players are going to be sold on to bigger and better things. That's part and parcel of it. Like, I think, I was listening to the Simon O'Rourke pod this morning, and, he was saying, can the Sunderland fans accept it? I think we'll sharp find out, won't we? Because this summer, either way, there's going to be a lot of that going on. So, Ballard's going to be one of many, many names that we hear about between now and the end of August, for sure.
Yeah. One other player who's linked with moves away, and you'll be shocked to hear this, is Chris Rigg. The Athletic and the iPaper both reporting that a whole host of Premier League clubs are looking at Chris Rigg, and it's just the least surprising story of the weekend, and I think maybe it's easy clicks in it. Yep. Liverpool linked with 40 million wonder kid, England superstar, whatever. Yeah, easy clicks. I'm very certain that Chris Rigg is being watched by pretty much every team in the Premier League. They'd be stupid if they weren't. Everybody's after the next big thing when it comes to the English market, and Rigg's going to be in the conversation. I think he's been linked with Liverpool, Everton, Spurs, West Ham, Man United. I even saw Newcastle tagged on the end of one of those stories. I mean, every club in the Premier League are going to be looking at Chris Rigg, and I'm just thinking, it is what it is. When it's one of them things.
Yeah, I mean, we'll hear about it constantly non-stop. But the only interesting thing that I thought from the article in the iPaper was they specifically mentioned Sunderland are expecting to be able to hold out for a fee more than Tottenham paid for Archie Gray from Leeds. Now, who knows whether there's any truth in that, because I don't think Christian Speakman's wandering around chatting to journalists going, so we value him at 30 million and him at 40 million. Yeah. But I think that's the first concrete mention I've seen of somebody putting a specific number out and saying Sunderland think they're going to get more than 30 million for him. So that's probably the only little new, unique bit of information you might want to pull from that. But apart from that, it's just going to be the same old recycled Chris Riggs class, and people want him for the next 3 or 4 months, innit?
Yes, he's already been brought up a number of times on these news pods, but we can't not mention that. It was in a couple of reputable newspapers, so or news outlets even. Lastly, we've apparently got a left-back on trial from Crystal Palace, but it's nothing special. It's just an under-18s player. He's called Freddie Cowans. He played for our under-18s at the weekend when they battered someone 6-1. Was it Liverpool? I think they absolutely tortured somebody 6-1. I'm pretty sure it was Liverpool. Anyways, he played in that game. I guess that's one for the future. Maybe we'll see if he signs. I'm guessing maybe he's been told by Palace to look around, and we might just be having a look at him, and we'll see how that goes. A couple of years ago, we went through a patch where, particularly when we were in League One, where we were using up a lot of the under-21s that were at the club to be part of the first team. And there was also the fact that the best under-18s and 21s players had been stolen by big clubs, and that left a bit of a gap. And then what we did was we just signed a load of players who'd been released by the likes of Leeds and Man U and Burnley and all that, and they were never going to amount to anything, but we signed them. I would like to think we're past that now, because it speaks for itself. The amount of kids we've got playing in the first team. I mean, there's 4 academy graduates on the pitch at the weekend from the start, which was, 5 if you count Patterson, 5 on the pitch in that starting 11. So we're obviously doing something right, but still, take a look at this lad, see how he is. I don't know nothing about him, not a name I've ever heard, but again, worth mentioning. Are you an expert on Freddie Cowans, Johnny?
This might shock you. No, I'm not. But I do think it's a good point you make, that it's nice to see us signing these kids from a position of strength rather than from a position of abject weakness like we were in the dark days in League One, when, you know, that exodus of the talented young players. I'm thinking of the likes of, the name's dropped out of my head, but the lad who ended up playing for Liverpool in the League Cup final the other season.
McConnell, is it?
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, and there was like Lucas Stevenson and a handful of others that were getting poached when they were, 14, 15.
Sam Greenwood,
Greenwood.
Josh Madger, you could probably count him.
Yeah,
there was a ton, wasn't there? There was an absolute. Josh Coburn went to Middlesbrough.
Yeah, there was loads, wasn't there?
Was loads.
From ones who were actually playing for us all the way through to ones who hadn't even got into the under 18s and stuff yet. So yeah, I think you're right. Now that's sort of in the past behind us by a few years, I think that anyone we do bring in who's like a young kid like that, look, he might never make an appearance for us, but I think at least we have the right to hope that he at least has some promise rather than being, just a body to make up the numbers.
Yeah, well, I think that's about it, mate, in terms of the news. Like I say, unless something major happens overnight, then we're bringing everybody up to date. This week, what have we got coming up? Well, we've got the preview for Bristol City away, which of course is on Good Friday, so a day early. And we've got the one and only Gary Hours joining us for that one. A bit of a Sunderland legend, and he's also heralded down in Bristol. He's actually co-commentator on their games nowadays, so we've managed to grab a chat with Gary Hours. That'll be out this week. And yes, we've got plenty coming because we've also got the Blackburn game on Monday, so there'll be reaction pods, there'll be reviews, there'll be obviously the preview for the Blackburn game, which we've got a Blackburn fan coming on for that one. So lots to come over the coming days. If we can sneak another one of these news pods in at some point, if there's stuff to talk about, we'll find it and we'll talk about it. So listen out for all the latest from Howie the podcast. If you're new to us, we are a brand new feed. You need to get subscribed so you don't miss another show. Hit that notification button. That means that you'll get a notification on your device as soon as a new pod drops, which at the minute seems to be every single day. We're up to, I think this is now our 39th episode in just over a month. So we're going crackers with the podcasts, and there's a bit to catch up on too. We've already mentioned that we had Simon O'Rourke on over the weekend, and that wasn't really a match review because we didn't really want to talk about Swansea too much. So it was all bigger picture stuff. Simon talking about his career as a journalist and what it used to be like covering Sunderland before social media spoiled everything for the rest of us. That was a great chat between him and Chris. And there was also the International Fan Party podcast, which went out on Monday. If you haven't heard that yet, make sure you catch up on it. That was just a great night. We were there on Friday. It was also our annual Rotor Report meetup / piss up, and me and Johnny had some awful videos of us dancing, mate. Nobody needs to see them, do they?
Yeah, horrendous. And my head was splitting the next morning.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. Nobody needs to see that stuff. But the chats that I had with the various fans on the night were fantastic and just sobering, and brings you back to what the whole point of this is, which is that we love Sunderland. Because you listen to these people who've spent thousands and travelled thousands of miles to then watch us get beat 1-0 off Swansea. And they'll be back next year, you can guarantee it. So, make sure you catch that. But there's loads to catch up on. There are interviews with a whole host of Sunderland heroes and legends from down the years, local journalists giving their insight. I mean, just make sure you go back through the back catalogue and listen to anything that you've missed, because you missed a lot if you're new to this. Anyways, that's enough of the plugs. Cheers, Johnny. Been great, mate.
Cheers, Gav. Yeah, pleasure as always.
Cheers to the listeners. Thank you very much for joining us once again. We'll be back with another pod at some point in the very near future. We'll see you later.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.